Joining me now is Vancouver Sun columnist Daphne Bramham. Daphne, welcome.
Thank you.
You are leaning towards a view that the no side is going to win this. How come?
Well, I haven't decided. And one of the things that makes that position of being undecided interesting is that you start to look around. And when I started to look around, what I kept finding was that, it's much easier to be no.
It certainly is.
Because every time that bus passed you by, you remember that when you think about, what do I care about transit? Because most of us, for the most part, we don't think about it. What I think has been lost in all of this is that the yes side is selling reason and the no side is selling passion. And the no side's got a much easier job to do because we don't know that very much about translink. So when you start to look at translink and you start to look at those salaries and you start to think about who are these people, and you don't know who those people are. They're faceless, they're nameless, there's this board of directors, you don't know who they are. It's not even clear that anybody can fire them, which makes you nervous about who's going to take this money. And people don't want to be taxed more. So what's coming out of this is this bubbling up of everything we don't like. We don't like it that the buses don't run on our schedule. We don't like it that we have to pay more fees. We don't like more taxes. And we've been through this long period of time where the distrust in government and politicians and institutions has been rising and rising and rising. And so all of this is put together. And what you have is people saying, I just don't like them. And I'm going to vote no.
Still, when you talk to most people and you ask them, but do you think that we need to have a better transit system? They all say yes.
Absolutely yes.
But no to this.
Absolutely yes. Everybody that I talk to says, I want a better transit system. I think it should be funded. Do I think that this plan might work? Yes, but, and then you get to the other stuff. You get, but I don't want a SkyTrain down Broadway. I don't like Gregor Robertson, some people say, especially people out in the valley. They don't like Gregor Robertson. They don't like the idea that this is a consumption tax. They don't think that's fair. They don't like that the provincial government swoops in and will do something like fund the replacement of the Massey Tunnel, but they won't pay for the other things. Mm-hmm. So they don't like tolls. So what you get is this incredible welling up of everything that's wrong. And what is extraordinary to me is that the way the yes side is acting, you would have thought that they did this off the back of an envelope 6 months ago, not even 6 months ago.
No, only since the municipal election.
Only since the municipal election. Their website, if you go and look at it, isn't fully constructed yet. If there was something wrong with the head of TransLink, couldn't they have got rid of him sooner? I mean, it just looks desperate and cynical when they do it this way. And I mean, the first column I wrote about TransLink or the transit plebiscite, I said that somebody needs to take responsibility for what's gone wrong. Because if somebody takes responsibility and apologizes for those things, if they were to apologize for this fiasco of Compass Card and say, you know what, this is how it happened, we're really sorry, we're going to do better in the future. If they took responsibility, if they had those things in place, we might be better off. You and I could drop a better plan for them than what they've got.
But Michael Geller says, we've gotten away from what the overall issue is, and that is we need improved transit. And so we've been diverted into topics about CEO salary, Compass system, and so on, and we're not really looking at what the issues are. And he points out that this is not something that was drawn up on the back of a napkin. It's actually been in the works for quite some time. Does he have a valid point there?
Absolutely, that's a valid point. If you're using reason, and if you go and read the plan, and you see all of the improvements that are going to be put in place, it will be a good plan. It will be a good thing. And I don't know whether Michael said this, but If this gets voted down,
Well,
what's going to happen?
Well, they say there is no plan B.
Well, there is a plan B.
What is that?
Well, the plan B is if you're a politician and you have a referendum, a plebiscite, even if it's a non-binding plebiscite, as this one is, if everybody says to you, we don't want to pay more for transit, because that's what the question is. The question is, do you want to pay more? Are you willing to pay 0.5% on the provincial sales tax? If this gets voted down, there's not a politician in the provincial government, there's not a local politician in the metro region who's going to say, I'm going to raise property taxes, I'm going to raise income taxes, I'm going to raise more tax, because the people will have spoken. And the problem with this referendum, with a referendum or a plebiscite, is that you can write whatever question you want. That's not always the question that the people are answering when they vote. And that's why I personally don't believe that that we should even be having this vote.
Well, okay, so who's responsible for this? Is it the mayor's council or is it the premier?
Oh, it's very much the premier.
She doesn't want to have to wear this the way that Gordon Campbell did it with HST.
Well, she's very much the cause of this because she promised to have this plebiscite. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is skirting around so that she can keep her promises of no more taxes. But it is a tax. It's not her tax. She'll say, oh, well, you voted for it yourself. But again, this is part of the diversion. And if you simply had been able to write a question, which they weren't able to, the Mayor's Council, they've been saddled with this, they had to come up with a solution. If you simply had a question that said, are you willing to pay more for transit and transportation, I think the vote would be overwhelmingly yes.
The way that it's worded, and when I started to look at it, it says, okay, are you willing to pay this 0.5% increase on sales tax? But then, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is you go into it further, it doesn't actually bind the provincial government or the federal government to come up with their parts, and the provincial government is already saying, well, if we do that, we're probably going to have to tax something else onto your homeowner's tax plan, which means that you're actually voting for 2 tax increases, not just 1. Do you read it that way?
Well, again, yes. I mean, if we had that certainty that 0.5%
was it,
maybe it would be easier to vote yes. But again, the question, if the question had been simple, are you willing to pay the money for? I think we would have got to yes. And again, this is a problem with the question. Do I think, I am convinced by the mayor's arguments that out of all of the ways to do the taxation, that this increase in the provincial sales tax seems to be the fairest. Although the consumption taxes are a regressive tax, it will cost poorer people a greater percentage of their income, but there are going to be other people that pay it. I mean, this is kind of the balancing. I think the Green Party just over the weekend, I think they said, what if, why can't the mayors or why can't somebody come up with a way that we can maybe help the lower end people, so that if you're quite poor or if you're not even paying income tax, maybe we can sort of give them some money. Of course, the accounting for that would be hopelessly difficult and would add even more to the administrative costs. But I think that the consumption tax, because it will be spread onto people who drive in and come, all the visitors and the tourists and the convention goers and so on, I think it does give us a little bit more money that we wouldn't get otherwise. Mm-hmm. But consumption taxes are a bad way to do this. The real problem here, there's so many problems here. Urban centers, most people now live in urban centers. Most people around the world live in a city. And yet we still have a system, a governance system, where the federal government doesn't see that it's important that they pay for urban transit. And the provincial government, it doesn't really seem to think it should pay for it. And yet the municipal governments, they have no power. Like they're creatures, as they say, of the provincial government.
Or children of the provincial
Or
government.
children of the provincial government, or orphans of the provincial government.
Well, maybe in this case that is a more appropriate definition, yeah.
And so the very heart of where we live, the centers of our economy, they're not being funded in a way that we need for them to succeed.
Right.
And for us to succeed.
So this money will go towards infrastructure. It's not going to go towards operation.
We're not even sure of that.
But, so let's say we start to get more light rail, rapid transit, we get more buses. It's my understanding that the money that goes in the box on each one of those vehicles as they move isn't enough to cover the cost of the fuel and maintenance, let alone the driver.
Right.
So, and there's a cap on how much you're allowed to charge the user. Mm-hmm. So we get this extra infrastructure, and then how do we afford to pay to keep it rolling on the road?
Well,
like to me, this is something that's not been laid out, and I project into the future and say, okay, well, how are you going to do that?
but why should somebody riding a bus have to pay the full cost of it when the people who are driving in their cars from Langley or from Surrey, they're not paying the full cost? They're not paying the full cost of the roads that they're driving on. They're not paying the full cost of the infrastructure that they're using. So why are we only demanding that people who use public transit pay the full cost of their public transit? It is called public transit for a reason. Mm-hmm. And the people...
Good point. Now you're arguing in favor of the yes side.
Well, I tell you, I mean, I am an undecided voter. And I think the reason that so many people have responded to what I've been writing about this is because people do want to get to yes. But mostly when they start looking and reading and talking to people, they're getting closer to no.
Well, as you pointed out, and I think that this is the big challenge, and it's why HST got defeated, is the no is an emotional reaction against a so-called rational reason that hasn't been spelled out clearly. Here's what you're going to get. Like if I were to ask you right now, what are they asking the money for? Like, can you give me a list of 6 of the things that they're asking money for?
I don't know if I can do 6. I can do some of them.
Right.
We're going to get buses. We're going to get, I think, 400 buses. I might be wrong.
You think. And this is the problem, right? We don't know exactly what we're getting. And then, so then you get thrown into the mix about the management, the way that it's all being rolled out. And it's much easier to have an emotional reaction and say, they don't know what they're doing.
But I don't think that this is any different than a provincial election. I mean, most of us vote kind of emotionally. I mean, if we were perfectly rational people, I mean, why is it that the campaigns that are hopeful and optimistic win, and the ones that say, you know what, it's going to be 4 more years of really tough slogging, most of those people lose? We vote on capital projects all the time in municipal elections. You know,
but that's part of the election process.
Right. But, I mean, most of the time before I go to the polls, I have to actually do a little bit of research, and I usually carry a list of who I might vote for. And sometimes I can't even vote for all of them because I don't know enough of them. And we approve money bylaws all the time. Mm-hmm. And somehow we never talk about them, and yet they just go through. Mm-hmm. And I can't quite understand why this has brought out such huge emotion. The money is a lot bigger.
But it's in the spotlight on its own. There's nothing else that's wrapped around it. And maybe this is what Derek Corrigan doesn't like. He's saying this is not a way to lead. Perhaps there is benefit to politicians to say, I'm going to bury it in the general ballot, and away we go from there.
Exactly, except that we've had this focus put on it. I mean, in some ways, I think there was at one point, it was supposed to go with the municipal ballot. And I think had it gone with the municipal ballot, it might have had a better chance. It would have been kind of buried in it, which is not to say that we shouldn't talk about these things. We're stuck with the referendum, plebiscite. We should be talking about this. But what we need to be careful of is that if you are going to vote no, you better be aware that voting no, if you're voting no because you don't like the way translink is set up, or if you don't like the idea of a referendum, somebody emailed me and said, well, we should just all not vote.
Okay, then what?
Well, that's what I said. So what happens? What happens if 3 people vote then? Those 3 people may decide whether you're going to have a tax or not. Like, how would you organize everybody not to vote? But people have so many disparate reasons for voting no that when they do decide to vote, when they do mark their ballot in the privacy of their home, they better be sure that what they're saying is no to transit and to more spending.
So the Mayor's Council has said that there's no plan B. From your perspective, if no wins, then what? Is there really no plan B?
I think we will spend 4 years with no plan B. We will spend 4 years where the amount of money, where we will be looking at cutbacks to service because the funding for translink will be frozen. There will be no new money. And we know that the operating costs rise every year. So in fact, the company translink service will be contracting because there will be no money for operating or for new buses or for any expansions. So if you vote no, you're voting for less service. You're voting to tell politicians that you don't want taxes raised to pay for these things. And what you're doing is you're telling politicians that you're not prepared to pay any more money. So when you vote no, you better be prepared for worse service. Not better service, worse service. You better be prepared that even though you don't like referendums and plebiscites, even though you don't like translink, even though you may not like Linda Hepner or the mayor in your municipality, any of those things, what you're saying is, I'm prepared to have less service because, in my view, and I may very well be wrong, but it would be a very, very brave leader in the municipalities or in the provincial government that would say, oh, they voted no, but let's give them more money. And I think when Christy Clark says, well, the mayors can always just raise property taxes. Well, you can't tell me that the West Vancouver mayor who said he's going to vote no in the plebiscite, that he's then going to go back to his voters and say, well, let's increase your property taxes then. So then what we start to have is each municipality will then be raising or not raising taxes. Linda Hebner says she's going to find a way to do her light rail transit regardless. So she has a plan B, we think.
Well, okay.
If she raises taxes. So maybe she's prepared to raise taxes. But what we're going to get then is we will start to see the breakdown of a regional system.
So you think the consequences of this will go beyond just like a deterioration in service, but there'll be an actual breakdown in the regional transportation system?
Well, if I were TransLink, if I were running TransLink, and the mayor of West Vancouver says when everyone else may be willing to raise their property taxes because they need service, and the mayor of West Vancouver or the mayor of Burnaby, who's going to vote no too, if they say we're not going to raise any money for this, then I'd say, well, then you don't get any buses. Because I need the buses out there where they actually care about buses. You don't need your buses, we'll take them.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to get people who drive their cars to say, okay, I'm going to commit to spending a bit more money for a public transit system. That is the other part of the equation. So you're trying to convince those people who don't use the system anyways.
But they're going to get roads. There are roads and bridges included in the plan. The other thing is, the more people you put on transit, the fewer people are going to be driving around.
Or so goes the theory.
Well, it is the theory. I mean, it's not just a theory. It's been proven. There's empirical evidence that every time you could put somebody on it. I mean,
yeah, but we have more people that are going to continue to move into the city. Like, this is part of the problem. Like, we're projecting a considerable amount of growth over the next couple of decades. So is this going to be enough to combat the increase in people who are moving into the area?
No.
So
well,
then,
I'm sorry. I'm not. Are you?
Population's going to go up. There's going to be more people on the road.
Well,
are these improvements going to be enough?
Except if you have a gridlocked city which is what we're looking at. If we don't do something, we'll probably have a gridlocked city. If you have a gridlocked city, are you going to move your company here? I mean, when you look at what's happening in downtown Vancouver, Microsoft has moved downtown. Sony DreamWorks is moving downtown. Not Dream, Sony ImageWorks is moving downtown.
Yeah, animation
The
division.
reason that they chose to move downtown is because there is good transit, SkyTrain connections, so that the people who work there will be able to get easily to work. If you have a gridlocked city, people don't move here. People don't come here. Businesses don't come here.
It's going to be an interesting debate, and it'll be very interesting to see how it plays itself out.
And you
over the
see,
next couple of months.
I've almost convinced myself to yes now talking to you.
I know. You come in here to tell me like why we're probably heading towards no, but if you start to spell it out logically, yes, it makes sense. But then you have this chorus of voices on the other side who go, no, no, no. And to the average person, they're thinking, but it's my money.
You know, I think the other really big problem with this vote is that there's such a long period of time that people have to vote.
I know.
So what you have is almost a phantom campaign, right? Apparently in the HST, most people voted towards the end of the period. But if you're running the campaign, yes or no, you don't even know how many voters you're still trying to attract. And so if you, like the people who vote early, they might vote no because the yes side has been slow off the mark. And by the end of it, the people might be convinced. So I think it's an incredibly difficult campaign to run. And the no side, they may sputter towards the end. They may have shot most of their big bullets, and maybe by the last few weeks, but by then maybe nobody's going to vote anymore.
So over the course of this interview, has it helped you to make up your mind?
No, yeah, a little bit, but you know, I'll go and read some more things and talk to some more people, but I think if people were to focus on the core message, which is, do you want transit, we'd get to yes. But they're making it damn hard for us to get to yes.
Well, we'll be watching what's happening out there and also your columns on this because it provides us with a considerable amount of insight. Thank you very much for doing this.